You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Hilliard MacBeth, CEO of the MacBeth Group in Edmonton and author of the book, When the Bubble Burst, Surviving the Canadian Real Estate Crash. Welcome to our first show this year, Hilliard.
It's great to be here in 2016. It's amazing.
Well, first of all, I want to ask about how is Alberta real estate doing with these oil prices now below $20?
Well, it hasn't really shown up in the numbers yet, as I was saying before, but it is definitely a grim picture. I was just at a lunch of the Edmonton Economic Development Corporation, and the guy wasn't even trying to be a cheerleader. He was trying to be like the realist, but it came across as very, very stark and gloomy, I guess would be the word. But, he pointed out that Edmonton has been a huge generator of jobs over the last 10 years, and Calgary even more so. And, he didn't mention what that's going to do to Canada if that's slow or when that slows down, but it obviously is slowing down.
Well, Alberta has 11% of the population, but is responsible or was for 20% of the economy. That's hard to replace.
It is. And, one of the things that I noted, since we last talked, was the reversal from the Bank of Canada on their take. So in April, Governor Pelot's Bank of Canada said, and I remember this almost like it was yesterday, it's a very front-end loaded shock or a one-time kind of shock, and by the second half of the year, and he means 2015, this shock should be fully behind us. And he was talking about the drop in the price of oil back in April. So what was different was in the recent time, he said a totally different tune, and now he's saying there's no simple policy response to this situation. The forces that have been set in motion simply must work themselves out. The economy's adjustment process can be difficult and painful for individuals, and then he goes on. But this is a huge change. It's basically a 180-degree about face, and of course he's talking about Alberta, but he's also recognizing that Alberta, as you just pointed out, being such a big part of Canada's growth story in the last 15 years, Alberta can't slow down without affecting the rest of Canada. I always think about British Columbia real estate in the interior and the Calgary oil money that buys up all those vacation properties, and there's going to be some bargains. It's probably too soon to start looking for them, but by next summer or by next winter, maybe 12 to 18 months from now, there'll be some great opportunities, and Vancouver Island for that matter too. But those Albertans just love to buy real estate in those two areas. But unfortunately, if they're losing money on their home in Edmonton and Calgary, they may not feel that flush to go and buy those homes. So that could be a big adjustment.
Well, just give up your home in Calgary and Edmonton and go live on the island.
Well, I think some people. I'm an older baby boomer myself, and I think a number of my friends that I know have retired, and they have done exactly that. They go out there. And of course, my advice is always, as I mentioned in the book, is to rent first before you buy. So just to get a feel if you like it or not. There's quite a few differences with, it's a fairly slow pace on the island, and there's some rain and stuff that we don't have in Alberta.
Sure, and then every May they do, or I think it's March, they do the flower count in Victoria. How many flowers do you count in Edmonton in March? Exactly,
you're still trying to chip the ice away from the... But they go out there, and what happens is, and this happened just very recently with a couple that I know, and both one's a lawyer, one's a judge, and they finally retired, and they went out with the intention of renting, and they just saw a place, they loved it, and they bought it. So they're gone, they're just, and that thing is to go in the winter. Then I think in the winter the prices would be maybe a little lower.
Yes, they are,
every summer it seems to me all the for sale signs go up on the island to catch an American or an Albertan, right? And but in the winter there's a lot fewer for sale signs, and those are the people that are really interested in selling. So that would be the time to go out there, and they might not, they might take my advice and rent for a year before they buy, and just to see whether they like it or not.
China is the elephant that's in the room right now. There's two theories I'm hearing about Chinese buyers coming to Canada. Can you maybe explain what they are?
Well, the first thing about the Chinese coming to Vancouver to buy real estate is that they are not as sophisticated as people think they are. They are very similar to Canadians in the respect that they have, because their own real estate has been going up for a number of years, they feel very comfortable with real estate, and they're not worried that real estate could drop in value. And because they made so much money on their real estate at home, they are flush with borrowing power. And I don't know if it's cash, because I don't think it is cash, because a lot of them have borrowed against the properties at home. And I just read yesterday, I was a little surprised that the Royal Bank of Canada has lifted their limit on foreign buyers coming into the Vancouver market. The old limit used to be $1.2 million for a mortgage, so I guess Canadian banks are giving mortgages to foreign buyers that are coming in as well. So there is borrowed money involved in these purchases. And the question is, will the Chinese government crack down on the ability of Chinese nationals to get their money out of China? So one theory is that the global markets are being shaken right now because people are worried about a massive devaluation of the Chinese currency, the yuan, and that would possibly be combined with capital controls, and then the money wouldn't be available to come out, and that could be very negative for Vancouver real estate. But the more optimistic people, and there are a lot of those people in Vancouver, they think that the rumors of this crackdown are going to cause even more money to hit the Vancouver market, and an even bigger flood of money. Although that's hard to imagine, a bigger flood is going to hit because people will be desperate to get their money out. It's very odd to me that a relatively poor country like China, with 5,000 to 10,000 income per person, is supporting a real estate market where our income is more like $50,000 to $70,000 in Canada. So we're a rich country being supported by real estate and money looking for investment from a relatively poor country. But if there is a crackdown on the capital flows, there is actually a law of I think it's $50,000, which obviously is not enforced very rigorously. But if it were to be enforced because of the Chinese government worried about all this money leaving China, it would impact us. And, Vancouver, Sydney, other major markets like perhaps Manhattan, London, that sort of thing, would feel the impact.
Well, I just talked to Gerald Salente the other day, and I asked him about the real estate bubble bursting in Vancouver, New York, London, Hong Kong. And he said, you've just named 4 cities in the world that even when they have real estate corrections, within a year or two, they're back at the same value, and then they continue to climb. And one of the biggest reasons is they're financial centers, and the bankers themselves know how to protect their money.
Yeah, it's interesting that you include Vancouver in that list, because Hong Kong, I was in Hong Kong in 2007. I spent a week there, and I was just amazed at how many high-paying jobs there are there. People that work for banks, every major Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch, RBC, and from Canada, everybody has an office in Hong Kong, and Credit Suisse, all the Swiss banks, and you see the people in their suits and ties. They dress, their shoes are all shined perfectly, and I'm sure they make a very high income because it's very expensive to live in Hong Kong. And so that's a true financial center, and London would be the same, and New York would be the same. But Vancouver, I don't think Vancouver actually belongs on that list, because I don't think there was. But
Hilliard, you just described a thing where Albertans come and visit. They love the weather in the wintertime, and they stay. 20,000 to 50,000 people a year move to the lower mainland of Vancouver. That's a huge demand on real estate. And of course, we have the ocean, the mountains, and the U.S. border, squeezing everybody into a small, very desirable space.
Yeah, I think there's an argument there, but the argument as a financial center, that one doesn't hold up. And I just wanted to mention about Hong Kong, because there was a story yesterday about Hong Kong. The Hong Kong real estate market is quite interesting in that it has periodically some very, very serious corrections, let's call them. We won't call them crashes. And it's true, they do recover, but the size of the corrections are enormous. I'm not sure exactly the year, but 1998, I would guess, prices went down more than 60% in Hong Kong, and it took years for it to come back. So it is not immune to major corrections in the price of real estate. But the difference in Hong Kong is, because there's not as much, at least back then, there wasn't as much debt, and there was not as much mortgage money financing the real estate purchases. There weren't any banks that went under. There were no major problems with banks. So the real estate prices went up and down, but everybody kind of just carried on as if nothing had happened. Obviously, something pretty big happened for some people.
Well, they just released per capita figures here in BC. no other city or greater city in North America has more luxury cars per capita. Those are cars that cost $150,000 or more, or as you would say, a condo in Edmonton.
Yeah, yeah. They can't even sell the condos in Edmonton for $150,000. Yeah, it's Vancouver's obviously not because it's a financial center, because it's not, but for other reasons. It's a major destination for wealthy people, and wealthy people buy real estate. There's no question about it. But I also read that Vancouver real estate, the building boom that's on, new building starts were up something like 50% year over year. So the idea that there's a shortage of land, unless they're somehow piling these projects on top of each other, they must be finding the land to build.
They are piling things on top of each other.
That's how they're doing it.
Well, condos that were built 20 years ago, they're taking down those 6-story buildings and building 25 to maybe 70-story towers.
It's interesting that we're talking about this, because I remember the first time I went to Manhattan, and I was walking along and I saw an elevator for cars. So there's a parking lot, and then they have an elevator, and they stack the cars 5 or 6 high, and so you can drive your car in, and then the parking lot attendant puts it in the elevator, and he moves it up to a higher level, and then he puts another car in, and so when maybe Vancouver's headed for that. I'm sure they have that in Hong Kong too.
We already have that in Vancouver too.
You already got that, so it's a special place. There's no question, but unfortunately, for Edmonton and Calgary, we don't have that extra kind of cachet that Vancouver is, where people just want to live there, even if they don't necessarily have a job. In Edmonton and Calgary, it's entirely due to employment, and as I mentioned, the older people, when they retire, they often leave. So we need new people coming to Edmonton and Calgary to get jobs, and the problem is the jobs are disappearing. The job growth is negative right now. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens to the real estate market in Edmonton and Calgary. In the index, there's no great numbers yet, but certainly there's going to be a big change in pricing going forward. There is apparently in the lower price stuff, 300 to 400,000, still some activity, but once you get over $1 million in Edmonton and over $1.5 million in Calgary, there's very, very few buyers. It'd be interesting. I don't think it would ever happen, but one of these people have these beautiful houses in West Van that they could get $3 million for. They could buy a lovely place in Calgary for $1.5 million and invest the difference and never have to work again. But I don't suppose people are going to move from West Van to Calgary, but they could.
Well, I know people on social assistance who could have taken high-paying jobs in Alberta or stay here in Vancouver and live on next to nothing, and they said, you couldn't drag me out of here with wild horses.
No, I haven't. I actually haven't seen anybody come back. I have seen people go to Vancouver Island from Alberta, and they don't like it, and they actually move back. But I've never. I can't think of a single case where somebody's moved to Vancouver and then reversed that decision. They go and then they stay. So it's a beautiful spot, and the problem with the government of Canada now is trying to manage an economy with so many different things. In Ontario, you've got the chance that exports are picking up because the dollar, I don't know if you saw it today, it went down into the 69-cent range. The oil price itself closed at $30.20, but it dipped briefly for the futures below $30. And something that probably isn't widely known yet is the fact that Western Canada Select, which is the grade of oil that we sell unrefined in Alberta out of the oil sands, only fetches $16 right now. So there's no way that the people that are mining for oil and producing it and transporting it can live on $16, and they can't even live on $30. But $16 is ridiculous. So we're going to find out very soon in early 2016, what exactly is going to happen with the Saudis are determined to force Canadian oil sands producers, U.S. shale oil producers, Brazilian offshore producers, maybe even the North Sea, Scottish and Norwegian producers, all these high-cost areas offshore Africa. They're determined to put them out of business, and I think they're actually willing to spend literally trillions of dollars in order to do it. They seem quite determined.
Well, I could see both the CIA and the successor to the KGB doing their very best to foment some kind of a very serious dispute between Saudi Arabia and Iran, because take a look and what that would do for oil prices in both Russia, the U.S., Canada, and the other major players.
Yeah, there's the Saudis and the Iranians have long been enemies with a different religious background in each case and a different lifestyle. Now, Iran is a much bigger country in terms of population, but they're not particularly wealthy because they haven't been allowed to sell their oil. So the new oil that's coming on stream from some of these countries could be as much as 4 million barrels a day. Iran alone could add 4 million barrels a day to the world production if they were allowed to. And Iraq, of course, is ramping up their production. But a dispute between Saudis and Iranian governments that if it escalated into a military conflict would change the whole world very quickly. And,
well, you have Canada condemning the executions in Saudi Arabia, but no, the country's not going to cancel its multi-billion-dollar weapons contract with Saudi Arabia to prove that protest is real. There's money to be made there, and money over lives every day in the world. You know what?
Those are really just trucks, right? They put a machine gun on top. So we should say, well, no, we're just selling the trucks, but somebody else is putting the machine gun on top. And I think it'd be really hard for that company that sells those things. I don't feel very good about it, but I also think it would be really hard for that company that sells those, that has that contract to.
Well, what about CIL in Montreal, one of the world's biggest supplier of bullets?
That's bad, but one of the big things is asbestos, and Quebec is one of the last jurisdictions in the whole world that still mines asbestos and sells it. We all know how bad asbestos is now. We didn't know before, but now that we know, I guess. I remember in the 2009 stock market crash, in March of 2009, the bottom, somebody did a run of all of the stocks in the New York Stock Exchange, and they actually couldn't find. There were hardly any stocks that had a positive return over the previous 30 years or something. I forget what the time frame was exactly, except for tobacco stocks. They were the only ones. There was two tobacco stocks, Altria and one other one that had a positive return. So I don't know. It's hard to cancel some of these things for reasons like that when there's a bunch of jobs at stake. At this lunch I was at, the person beside me owned a construction company, and he said, I asked him how things were, because things are pretty, slowing down pretty fast in Alberta, but there's still lots of contracts and jobs that will still be, the backlog is still carry on for another year or two. But he said that if it weren't for the schools that were being built right now, and those schools were needed for years in Alberta because so many people were moving to Alberta and they never got built, and now they're actually building them. And he said if it weren't for those schools that we're working on, we'd be really, really struggling for business right now. So, and
by the time those schools are built, there won't be any kids to go in them.
Well, that's what the thought did go through my mind, but I didn't want to say anything. But, I mean, a couple of years ago at the peak of this thing, they had these portable trailers lined up, and parents were protesting on the steps of the legislature, and they'd open up all these new neighborhoods, but they didn't bother to build a school, and they kept saying they were going to build the schools, and they never got around to it for some reason. And finally, I think maybe because of the change of the government in the spring, they finally are actually building them. And but in a slump is actually the best time to build this stuff, right? And when the oil sands construction activity was at its peak a couple of years ago, labor costs were so high, construction costs were so high, everything cost double what it did in Ontario. That wasn't the time to build stuff. Now that the slump is here, now is the time to build stuff. So, but the problem is going to be that the government's going to have to go out and borrow a lot of money. Alberta just lost its AAA credit rating. And,
well, Hilliard, don't forget, up until the 70s, Canada borrowed from itself for government projects and had virtually no debt. This idea of a central bank, the Bank of Canada is not owned by Canadians. It's owned by the 12 biggest banks in the country. And what's good for the banks is good for the Bank of Canada. What if they just went back to having the national treasury again, and where Canadians themselves could borrow virtually interest-free?
I think it wouldn't be a bad thing for people to borrow. I mean, obviously, the government of Canada's AAA credit rating is at risk now with what's happening with the oil price and that sort of thing. But even if it goes to AA or single A, it wouldn't be a bad thing if we borrowed from ourselves and spent some money on building some stuff that needs to be done. And the problem becomes, of course, what should be built. Like, we just in the process of building a hockey arena at Edmonton with some contribution from the government purse and taxpayers. And Calgary's now, Gary Bettman was just in Calgary yesterday talking up a new stadium for Calgary. And of course they want government money. They don't want, the private sector doesn't want to do it. So,
well, research has shown there has been no civic stadium that has got back its money. The only people who make money on that stadium are the professional team that plays in it.
Exactly, and the owner of the team, in Edmonton's case, paid about $200 million US for the team, is now rumored to be worth as much as $500 million US. And with a new stadium, of course, that makes it a very attractive property to own.
But who's going to buy or rent those corporate boxes?
Well, that's what I was wondering, and I don't know about the boxes. I haven't heard the numbers, but I have a friend who's got his season tickets, and he was telling me about the cost, and it's unbelievable. It's like $250 to $300. I'm sure it's the same in Vancouver to go to a hockey game. Sometimes I think, I don't personally have that. If I go, it's because somebody invites me. But years and years ago, when Gretzky and Messier were here, I did have some tickets, and even in those days, as exciting as it was often, if you couldn't go yourself, you had to find somebody, a friend or a client who wanted to go. And it drove me crazy. I'd end up spending half a day on the phone or a full day on the phone just trying to find somebody that wanted to go. So I think it must be companies that are buying these tickets. I can't see individuals paying $250 to $300 per game. And of course, you have to buy the whole bundle. And
I look at what the price of a box is. I'm going, could I just stay there all the time and call that my home? I mean, I'd have a place to go skate. I love skating, so it would be the perfect home. Instead of having just corporate people come in. In fact, game day, I'd move out and let people come in.
We were, the other comment at lunch was Edmonton people love to get away for the winter to usually Palm Springs, Palm Desert, or some people Phoenix, but Palm Springs is very convenient because there's a direct flight with WestJet. And the fellow was saying, and I've heard this from other people, the flight was half empty going in, coming back, and the prices come way down. And he said that, he's been going for years, and he said those flights were always full. And that was my experience too. And they used to just absolutely rape and pillage you on the price, right? Because they knew they had a captive audience. There's really no alternative. There's no Air Canada flight. There's no other way. But apparently so people are definitely changing their staying home. So maybe they will stay home and go to hockey games instead of going to Palm Desert and enjoying the California sun.
Well, what about this new startup airline that'll serve mostly Western Canada's smaller cities, New Leaf? What are chances do they have of being successful?
I think they might be up for the worst possible timing in the history of timing these things. But I think the Calgary dealership for luxury cars has probably got the top billing. I forget whether it was Lamborghini or Ferrari or somebody opened up a dealership in the spring of this year in the absolutely worst possible timing ever. And so it's either that airlines or, although on the other hand, you could say maybe that airlines will, I like the airlines chance better than the Lamborghini dealership, because at least the airlines, if people stay home, they might want to go and visit. But I don't know. It's
well, I hear their business plan is for $89 they can get you anywhere. But as they said, we sell you the seat and the seat belt. You want anything else, you're going to pay for it.
We went to in the summer. We went on a trip to Scotland, 2 weeks, and the flight we had to go to Inverness, and the flight from Heathrow. There was no direct flight when we landed, so I noticed there was a flight to Dublin on one of these little $99 airlines, right? I forget the name of it, but
Aer Lingus or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. That was it, Aer Lingus. So we go, and that was fine. And then we went the next day. We just stayed one night, and the next day we were going on to Inverness because we had to get onto the rest of our trip. And I go to the check-in, and the flight was really cheap. I don't even think it was like 30 or 40 British pounds or something like that. We go to check in, and I got my bag and my wife's bag, and she said, "Well, that'll be 100 pounds." It was 50 pounds per bag. It cost nothing for the seat, but if you got luggage, forget it. So you have to read the fine print on these things. That's what I learned about that.
And it is cheaper too to fly out of the smaller airports in the UK as well.
Yeah, no, I think and of course we also went on the train, which was lovely too. So Western Canada, I guess the problem we have here, and I know there's a proposal to have a high-speed bullet train between Edmonton and Calgary, is we just don't have the population, and we got these huge wide spaces. So
And here in Vancouver, where we could use more trains, the government has no plans to put them in.
Yeah, that's amazing. You know, with this infrastructure spending that the federal government, the Trudeau government, was talking about when they got elected, maybe that's what they're waiting for. Because surely something like that makes a lot of sense. They can either, the way I see it is that with the slowdown in the economy because of oil and everything else, they could either just sit and pay unemployment insurance to people, or they could do some of these projects and keep them busy and have something to show for it, 5 years from now.
Sure, take a look at the Wascana Bridge in Regina, the world's longest bridge over the smallest body of water. That was built during the Depression, still very useful today.
Exactly. There must be stuff. But then you get into the question, though, of as we were saying, everybody has their own favorite project and so. But that's why these people that get elected have to do their job. They have to make a decision.
Well, here in Vancouver too, the government said they're going to go ahead with a giant bridge over the Fraser River to replace the Massey Tunnel. It's a 4-lane tunnel that's always a permanent traffic jam, and they're going to build a bridge that's wider even than the Port Mann Bridge in Vancouver, which is the widest bridge in the world. Now, if something's going to encourage urban sprawl, it's going to be a giant bridge with no rapid transit on it.
Yeah, you think that with the trend in cars, I'm thinking there's a bit of a trend away from cars.
Well, take a look at Vancouver itself. If you're not a bicycle path, you're nothing.
Exactly.
I mean, they have squeezed out something like 30,000 parking spaces.
I bet. I haven't done the work on this, but I bet if you went through Vancouver, and then we talked about a minute ago about shortage of land and all that, and you just eliminated all the places where cars are parked, stored for an hour or for a day or whatever, you'd find you'd free up a bunch of space, a whole bunch of space, and that would make it like Copenhagen.
Well, that's why they're talking about, I was going to say, ride your bikes, but then a lot of these cities that have lots of bikes are very flat. And also, the mayor of Vancouver expecting commuters, 600,000 to 1 million people a day drive into Vancouver to work and then they leave. But the city of Vancouver has no concern for those people whatsoever. They expect you to walk or bike to work.
We were, in the summer, we were at a mountain resort, and somebody showed up with a bike and it had a little electric motor attached to it.
Yeah, those are nice.
And I went on it. It was amazing. You just pedal a little bit and it gives you this acceleration. That would get you to work, no problem.
Well, Hilliard, so if you're concerned about real estate, what would you do in Alberta right now?
Well, I was talking to a fellow yesterday. He said it's too bad your book didn't come out a little earlier because he's saying that his friend was unable to sell their property, and so they'd learned about the possibility of a downturn in the real estate market too late. And I think that's the case. I think people, it's going to be a tough time in Alberta to sell properties. People have to just sort of settle in and hunker down. But in the rest of Canada, especially Vancouver and Toronto, there's lots of people eager to buy, and somebody that has either retirement plans or too much debt or feels like it's a good time to take a profit. The opportunities are wonderful timing there. So,
and I know with the lower Canadian dollar too, people talk about the revival of manufacturing in Ontario and Quebec, but BC apparently has also done very well in manufacturing and exporting to the States.
Yeah, they mentioned BC, Ontario, and Alberta. And of course, Alberta exports tend to be more resources, but BC and Ontario have got manufacturing exports, other kinds of exports. And don't forget, tourism, especially ecotourism, could be a huge potential for Canada because I noticed that Whistler is very booked up right now because all of the Americans find it extremely reasonable price to even at $300 or $400 a night for the hotel room. To them, it's a bargain. So there's going to be some tremendous benefits that'll go to some parts of Canada because of the dollar being so cheap. Unfortunately, Alberta's probably not going to get in on that. Maybe Banff and Jasper, but the tourism that's going to come to BC, especially in parts of Ontario, I guess Niagara Falls, that'll be a wonderful boost.
Yeah, we should get more ads out there and promote the fact that your dollar in the U.S. is worth $1.40 in Canada.
$1.40, soon to be probably $1.50.
Yeah. So the only shock for Americans will again be the price of gasoline when they get here because of our high taxes and the manipulation due to a lack of competition. But really, I haven't seen any ads on American TV promoting our country is a great place to visit right now because your dollar will go a long way. Of course, for most of the country, they have to wait until it warms up a bit. But for Vancouver, Whistler, Victoria, this time of year, it's very attractive. If you're a Canadian, come visit this city. Or come visit the Lower Mainland or the lower southwest quadrant of British Columbia. The weather is great, and believe me, even if it snows here, it lasts for a minute or two, and then the Vancouver Snow Removal Service, rain, shows up. And it's not as rainy and as gloomy here as people think it is either. That's what we tell people who are thinking of moving here, is that it's rainy all the time. But look at our last summer, 4 months without a drop of rain.
Yeah, well, summer, I find, I used to live in Vancouver. I found summer to be wonderful. It's those long winters that are, I mean, you can either have blue sky and minus 30 or you can have plus 10 and rain. So you got your choice. Yep,
and depending where you live in the Lower Mainland, if you're in White Rock, they have a Northern California climate, so they get very little rain as well. It's just where you live here. If you don't like the weather in Vancouver, drive for 5 minutes.
Yeah, I guess that's right. You got to live in the right part of Vancouver in exactly the right spot.
I mean, the North Shore Mountains get pelted with rain even on sunny days.
Exactly.
It just appears there. Anyway, Hilliard, it's been great talking to you, and I'm sure we have very interesting times ahead of us.
Yes, I'm looking forward to 2016, and there'll be some great investment opportunities in Canada as well.
Thanks a lot again.
Thank you.
My guest has been Hilliard MacBeth, CEO of the MacBeth.com group in Edmonton, and author of the book, When the Bubble Burst, Surviving the Canadian Real Estate Crash. Hilliard, where can people get a copy of that book?
All the major bookstores in Canada, plus Amazon.com and Amazon.ca, and the online version of chapters as well.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
You're listening to HowStreet.com Radio. Find us on Twitter at Talk Digital Net. Our popular YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. You can forward comments for the show to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on HowStreet.com Radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com Radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.